There are nights when the ghosts of the past are no longer just memories, they come alive, waiting for us in mirrors and the hidden corners of our minds. Halloween, the night when the boundary between dreams and reality blurs, is the perfect time for the worst things to find their way back. Tonight, let's step into Hollow Creek, a small town buried under an ancient curse. Imagine yourself as Evan, a 17-year-old boy who lost his parents on Halloween night. 10 years ago, they vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the sound of shattering glass and endless darkness. And now, as the ghosts of the past awaken with the tolling of the church bells, Evan must confront the most terrifying truth: he himself is the key to the curse. But sometimes, facing yourself is the scariest thing of all. Buckle up, and don't take your eyes off the darkness. Because once the mirror breaks, no one knows what might emerge from the other side. Evan pedaled lightly on his old bicycle, the wheels crunching over the gravel road that stretched before him. Late October in the town of Hollow Creek felt like it was wrapped in an eerie mist, dry. Red leaves tumbled at the mercy of the wind, and every house was adorned with jack-o'-lanterns, their crooked faces smirking in mockery. Here, Halloween wasn't just a holiday, it was the night when an ancient curse hunted for new victims. As Evan rode past an abandoned house left untouched for over a decade, a shiver ran down his spine. He felt as if something was watching him from one of the shattered windows. The darkness behind the cracked glass seemed to reach out, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. But Evan was used to the feeling. Halloween had always felt like a suspended moment in time for him, a night when memories from the past came rushing back. Exactly 10 years ago, on this very night, his parents had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no notes, just the sound of shattering glass from the upstairs room, echoing through the house, before they disappeared as if they had been erased from existence. Never break a mirror on Halloween, his grandmother had whispered to him. When a mirror breaks, what's inside won't stay trapped. But now, at 17, Evan no longer believed in his grandmother's superstitions. All he wanted was to survive Halloween, avoid the costumed kids swarming the streets, and try not to think about the fact that his parents had vanished into thin air a decade ago. The abandoned house loomed ahead like a sleeping monster. His friends were already waiting for him in the overgrown yard: Matt, Sarah, and Jay, the kid who wore a hoodie even in the middle of summer. Matt shot Evan a mischievous grin. "Ready, Evan?" Matt teased, clearly trying to get under his skin. "You know why we're here. We're calling the spirits tonight." Evan shrugged, pretending not to care, though his heart pounded faster as his gaze drifted toward the front door of the house. Memories danced on the edges of his mind. Just out of reach. "It's just an old house," Evan muttered to himself. "Nothing's going to happen." The door groaned as they pushed it open, as if the house had just swallowed them whole. Dust coated the wooden floor, creaking under every step. The peeling walls revealed dark, rotted wood beneath, and a chandelier swayed lightly overhead, threatening to fall at any moment. Jay chuckled. "I heard this house belonged to a witch. They hanged her from the oak tree right out front." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Cut it out, Jay. You're not helping." But even she couldn't hide the tension in her voice. They could all feel it, that something was lurking in the shadows of the house, creeping through the cracks in the walls. And then they found the mirror. It lay tilted against a wall in one of the back rooms, its surface dulled with age. When Matt shined his flashlight on it, the light reflected oddly, as if the glass was rippling beneath the surface. It wasn't smooth, it seemed like something was shifting just under the silvered surface, as if shadows were stirring in another world, waiting to be released. Evan reached out and touched the frame. A sharp chill ran through him, cutting straight to the bone. For a fleeting moment, he saw his own reflection, but it wasn't quite right. The Evan in the mirror wasn't standing still. That reflection curled its lips into a pale, twisted grin, even though Evan hadn't moved at all. "Evan?" Matt's voice snapped him back to reality. And then it happened. The mirror shattered with a deafening crack, sending shards of glass flying through the air. Evan ducked just in time, but one sharp fragment grazed his cheek, leaving a thin cut. Blood trickled down his cold skin. But it wasn't the pain that chilled him, it was the sense that something had escaped along with the broken glass. Matt cursed, stumbling backward. "What the hell? Evan, what did you do?" Evan didn't answer. His eyes were glued to the shattered pieces on the floor. In every shard, his reflection stared back at him, but each fragment seemed to hold a different version of him. All wearing the same pale, twisted grin. And then, from deep within the shadows of the house, a whisper drifted through the air, faint but filled with malice. Like it had been waiting decades to be set free. "I've returned." A wave of cold ran down Evan's spine. He wanted to run, but his legs felt as heavy as stone. His friends had heard the whisper too. A voice carried not just through the room but through the shards of glass and into their minds. Sarah's voice trembled as she whispered, "We shouldn't have come here." Even Jay, who always acted fearless, was now pale. "Tell me we didn't just release something." Evan swallowed hard, his mouth dry with fear. He could feel it. The world had shifted the moment the mirror shattered. Halloween had once again brought back the terror he knew so well, but this time, it was worse. This time, he had opened the door himself. "We need to get out," Matt said, his voice low and strained. But as they turned to leave, the front door slammed shut with a loud, jarring bang, and from the shattered mirror, faint giggles began to rise, not their own, but those of the reflections trapped inside. Evan and his friends bolted out of the living room, shards of shattered glass crunching underfoot, their breaths shallow and ragged as fear clung to them like a heavy fog they couldn't escape. The house felt alive, floorboards groaned beneath their weight, windows screeched with eerie whistles, and somewhere upstairs, something clawed at the wooden walls with a high-pitched scrape, as if it were scratching at their very souls. "Damn it, I really hate this," Matt panted, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Quiet," Sarah snapped, gripping Evan's arm tightly. "Do you hear that? The bells." From somewhere deep in the night, church bells tolled. Their sound was deep and cold, utterly out of place amidst the lively noises of Halloween. The bells rang 12 times, despite the fact that the clock had just struck 11. Jay shivered, trying and failing to mask his fear. That's not right. The bells aren't supposed to ring. There's no service tonight, and that church has been abandoned for years. Hasn't it? Evan nodded. Everyone in town knew the old church had been closed for 15 years, the same year his parents vanished. No one had pulled those bells in over a decade. And yet, the bells tolled on, steady as the heartbeat of someone on the edge of death. They were not the only ones awake tonight. "We need to get out of here," Evan whispered, tugging on Sarah's hand, but as they approached the door, a sudden gust of wind slammed it shut with a deafening thud. This wasn't an ordinary wind. It carried the stench of charred wood and rotting flesh. A foul odor that squeezed their lungs tight. Sarah's eyes widened in panic. "There's something here. It doesn't want us to leave." The room grew darker, unnaturally so, as if every last bit of light had been sucked away into the shadows. Matt's flashlight, which had been bright just minutes ago, now barely flickered, as if drowning in an invisible sea of darkness. "Something's watching us," Evan whispered, his heart racing. It was the same gnawing fear that had haunted his nightmares about his parents, an oppressive presence that tightened around him like a noose. The shattered mirror on the floor shifted. Its broken pieces no longer reflected their faces but instead displayed fractured memories from a distant past. In one shard, Evan saw the last image of his parents, standing in front of the same mirror. As if performing a ritual, his mother's eyes were filled with dread as she traced strange symbols on the mirror's frame with a black powder that looked like ash. Evan stumbled back, cold fear washing over him like a tidal wave. They were here. "Who?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Evan didn't answer immediately. The truth was slowly coming into focus, though not in the way he'd hoped. This mirror wasn't just a reflection, it was a prison. And if his parents had been here before, it could only mean one thing. The witch appeared. She was no ghost, no fleeting spirit. She was flesh and bone, standing quietly in the corner of the room as if she had been waiting for them all along. Her face was wrinkled, and her eyes were hollow. Dark voids where memories and fears fell, never to escape. "You broke the seal," the witch rasped, her voice dry as bones grinding together. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." They froze in place, paralyzed by fear. Matt stammered, Who are you?" The witch smiled, a thin, pale smile, like mist evaporating at dawn. "I am the one who sealed it the first time, but you fools were too stupid to leave it closed." Evan felt the room spin around him. The shards of glass whispered now, faint and insistent, like cold wind creeping through cracks in a window on a winter night. Over and over, they repeated the same chilling phrase. "We will return." The witch leaned closer, her claw-like hand resting on Evan's shoulder. "Listen carefully, boy. That mirror was a doorway. And now that it's shattered, nothing can stop what's on the other side." What's on the other side?" Evan asked, his voice cracking. The witch leaned closer, the smell of earth and ash clinging to every word she spoke. "Darkness, a curse, and monsters disguised as people. They are hungry now, and they want what was taken from them." Evan's legs felt heavy as stone. He glanced at his friends, Matt, Sarah, and Jay, and saw the terror spreading across their faces. But what scared him even more was the sight of their reflections in the shards of glass. The reflections had changed. Each version of them wore a twisted, chilling grin, and their eyes were dark and empty. These were not his friends anymore. Jay gasped, "We need to get out of here, now." The witch only chuckled. "There's no escaping this. It's too late." The bells tolled one final time, a harsh, final note, like the sound of a coffin lid slamming shut. And in the darkness, the reflections began to move, shifting and writhing as if trying to cross over into reality. Evan stumbled back, unable to tear his eyes away from the grotesque figures in the glass. He could feel the darkness closing in, ticking down toward midnight. One thing was clear: if they didn't find a way to seal the evil before the clock struck 12, none of them would live to see the morning. He wasn't sure how much he could trust the witch, but one thing was certain: tonight would be the longest night of his life. The house swallowed the light. Every source, flashlights, the moonlight filtering through the windows, and even the dim street lights from outside, vanished into the darkness. The world seemed to recede into shadow, leaving Evan and his friends trapped in a warped reality. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with panic, as if something were choking the air from her lungs. "Now, you think we haven't tried?" Matt snapped, his breathing ragged like a hunted animal. The door wouldn't budge, as if fused to the frame with some invisible force from another realm. But the sealed door wasn't the most terrifying thing. The figures in the mirror were moving, no longer bound. They shuffled with sluggish, deliberate movements, as if time had slowed to a crawl. Bit by bit, they began to emerge from the shards of broken glass scattered across the floor. "Look," Jay cried, stumbling backward, "they're coming out." Evan stood frozen, paralyzed by a wave of fear. Among the reflections, he spotted a familiar face. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that face all too well, even after all these years. It was his mother. She stood inside the mirror, wearing the faded blue dress she used to wear on lazy weekends. Her hair was tangled, and her eyes, wide, empty, and haunting, stared directly at him. Her arms were outstretched, as if waiting to embrace him. "Evan," her voice drifted like a breeze across a desolate field, weak, distant, yet filled with pain and longing. "It's me. I've been waiting for you, for so long." Evan felt his legs falter beneath him, as if his body no longer obeyed him. "She's here. She's not dead. She didn't leave me. She's been trapped here, all along." "Mom?" Evan whispered, taking a step toward the mirror as if in a trance. "Is it really you?" Matt grabbed Evan by the shoulders and yanked him back. "Are you out of your mind? That's not your mom. It's messing with you." Evan jerked free, his gaze fixed on the image in the mirror. "No, it's her. It has to be." But as he stared, the figure in the mirror began to distort. Her eyes widened, unnaturally large, and the smile on her lips stretched far beyond what was humanly possible, curling grotesquely toward her ears. This was not his mother. "Come to me." Her voice had grown deeper, a strange mixture of temptation and menace. "Let me hold you." "Evan, I've waited so long." Evan staggered backward, his legs trembling. "This isn't her. Get out of my head," he screamed, clutching his head with both hands. But her voice slithered into his mind, sharp as needles piercing his brain. "You'll stay with me forever. There is no escape, my son." The darkness in the house began to contract, as if preparing to ensnare them. The figures from the mirror were halfway out now, their bony hands stretching beyond the shards of glass, their clawed fingers curling hungrily. Jay shrieked, panic overtaking him. "What the hell do we do now?" The witch, standing calmly in the corner, folded her arms and watched as if she'd seen this play out 1,000 times before. Once freed, it cannot be sealed easily, she murmured, but there is still time, if you have the courage to face the truth. What truth? Evan shouted, his voice raw with desperation. The witch leaned closer to him, her breath smelling of ash and earth. You know, boy, the truth is, the monster was never in the mirror. It's inside you. Her words sliced through Evan's mind like an icy blade. He recalled every nightmare he'd had over the years, his parents vanishing, the sound of shattered glass, and the eerie, distorted laughter that haunted him every night. He had always felt something lurking inside him, a shadow he could never shake off. No, Evan whispered, his voice trembling. I'm not a monster. I'm not. But you were the one who opened the door. The witch whispered. And now, you must face it, or let it consume you. The creatures from the mirror fully emerged now, their twisted bodies flickering like distorted images from a nightmare. One of them, an identical version of Evan, stepped forward, its eyes as black as the void. Don't be afraid, the mirror, Evan whispered, its voice cold and soothing. Let me take over for a while. You won't have to feel the pain anymore. You won't have to remember the night your parents disappeared. You won't have to feel guilty. I'll carry it all for you. No, Evan screamed, but his doppelganger only smiled, a pale, empty grin. Then, it lunged forward, merging with Evan in a violent embrace. Evan collapsed onto the cold floor, his body convulsing as darkness flooded every corner of his mind. His eyes opened wide, but all he could see was the rising tide of shadow swallowing the world. He heard his friends calling his name, their footsteps frantic as they scrambled to find a way out. But their voices sounded distant, as if coming from another world. And then, a new voice whispered inside his head, calm, familiar, and terrifying. Now, Evan, let me lead the way. The darkness closed in completely. Evan opened his eyes. Darkness surrounded him, thick and suffocating, making it impossible to tell if he was standing, lying down, or floating in a void. There was no floor beneath his feet, no walls to lean against, just emptiness, cold and endless. Then, a flash of light appeared, not natural light, but the eerie glow from a mirror in front of him. He stared into it and saw his own reflection staring back, emotionless. But the terrifying part was that the reflection didn't mimic his movements. Hello, Evan, the reflection whispered from the other side. It smiled, a faint, jagged grin that looked more like a tear in its face. Welcome to where it all ends. The light spread, and Evan realized he was standing inside a massive maze of mirrors. Walls of glass stretched endlessly in every direction, each panel reflecting him over and over again. In every reflection, his image sneered back at him, twisted and artificial. Evan spun around, hoping to find Matt, Sarah, or Jay, but he was alone. His footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing off every surface, as if the mirrors themselves were mocking his attempt to find a way out. This isn't real, Evan muttered under his breath, trying to steady himself. It can't be real. Then, the sound of distant giggling drifted through the maze, soft, eerie, like children playing hide and seek in the dark. A chill ran down Evan's spine. He turned, and there they were, his parents. But not as he remembered them. Their faces were pale, their eyes dark, empty voids, and they reached out their hands as if beckoning him into their embrace. Evan, you've finally come. His mother's voice whispered, soft as a dying breeze. We've been waiting for you, for so long. Evan stumbled backward, but his father stepped forward. There's nothing to fear, son, stay with us. No more pain, no more fear. It will all be over. No, Evan whispered, trying to keep his composure. You're not my parents. You're just something from the mirror. His mother laughed, a sound that cracked and splintered like shattering glass. Is that so, Evan? Or are you just lying to yourself? You broke the mirror. Now, we all belong here. Evan turned and ran, the sound of his footsteps echoing like the steps of 1,000 versions of himself. He didn't know where he was going, only that if he stopped, something would catch him. The mirrored hallways stretched endlessly, and every time he glanced into the glass, he saw different versions of himself. One Evan sobbed uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face, but with a deranged smile curling his lips. Another Evan was strangling Matt, a sick pleasure gleaming in his eyes. And in one final reflection, Evan saw himself, covered in blood, his eyes dark as the abyss, empty and endless. Evan dropped to his knees, clutching his head, trying to block out the horrifying images swarming his mind. But the darkness in the maze gave him no reprieve. Whispers surrounded him, a cacophony of curses and taunts, rising from every corner of the maze. "You can't run, Evan." His doppelganger's voice echoed through the labyrinth. "We are the same. You can't escape yourself." Evan forced himself to his feet, his breath heavy, heart pounding like a drum. There was no exit. Every corridor led back to the same spot, where his reflection, his darker self, stood waiting. That same sinister grin stretched across its face. "Let me tell you a secret," the reflection whispered, leaning closer through the glass. "I'm the real you. You're just the shadow. You were the one trapped here all along." "No," Evan whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're lying. I'm real. I'm the real one. Are you?" The reflection smiled wider, its grin splitting unnaturally. Then, it reached through the mirror, pulling Evan closer. The darkness surged forward, filling every crack and crevice. "Now we switch places," the reflection hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "And this time, you won't be coming back." Evan's hand pressed against the cold surface of the mirror. And in that fleeting moment, he realized the truth. If he didn't confront his darker self, the darkness would consume him forever. With every ounce of strength he had left, Evan resisted, as his reflection pulled harder. Evan pulled back. "No, I won't let you win." The mirror cracked with a deafening sound, fractures spidering across the glass like a web spun by a vengeful creature. The reflection laughed, a mad, distorted sound, but it was growing weaker. Evan pushed harder, forcing every bit of his will into the glass. And then, the mirror shattered. Blinding light erupted from the broken glass, consuming the darkness. Evan collapsed onto the cold floor, gasping for air like someone pulled from the depths of a drowning sea. The maze was gone, but before he could process his escape, a final whisper curled into his ear. "We're not done yet, Evan." Evan woke up, drenched in sweat. He lay on the cold floor of the abandoned house, shards of broken glass scattered around him. The room was eerily silent, no footsteps, no sign of Matt, Sarah, or Jay. He sat up, his head spinning. His watch read 11:57. 3 minutes left until midnight. 3 minutes to make a decision that could either save everyone, or doom them all. A soft chuckle echoed from the shadows, a faint, unsettling sound that seemed to come from the very walls. Evan turned and saw another version of himself standing in the corner of the room. This version had hollow black eyes and a grin that stretched unnaturally wide, splitting across its face like a wound. "Hello, Evan," the doppelganger whispered, its voice soft and haunting. "I told you, we can't be separated. It's too late to escape now." Evan stood on shaky legs, his gaze fixed on the dark reflection before him. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice raspy with fear. The copy tilted its head, the grin widening even further. "I want exactly what you want, Evan. We both want freedom, but only one of us can exist in this world." The distant church bell tolled, slow and heavy, as if marking the countdown to the final moments before darkness consumed everything. Evan took a step back, realization dawning. "My parents, where are they?" The doppelganger sneered, then pointed toward a large, cracked mirror resting against the wall. "They're in there. They've been trapped inside that mirror all along, locked away by their own attempt to seal the curse." Evan's heart tightened. The truth hit him hard. His parents had tried to contain the curse, and in doing so, they had been imprisoned in the mirror's otherworldly dimension. Now, Evan faced an impossible choice: free them and unleash the evil, or seal everything, including himself, forever. The bell tolled again. 11:59, 1 minute left. The dark copy took a step closer, its black eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "You know what to do, Evan. Smash the mirror. Set us all free. You'll be reunited with your parents." Evan's throat felt dry. He stood before the mirror, fingers brushing against the cold, cracked surface. Through the jagged glass, he could see his mother's face, her eyes filled with desperate longing. "Son," her lips moved silently. "Please, save me." The watch ticked to 11 hours 59 minutes and 45 seconds. 15 seconds left. Evan clenched his fists, heart heavy with the impossible choice. One more strike would shatter the mirror. releasing his parents and the curse. The evil would be free, and there would be nothing to stop it from consuming him entirely. "I knew you did," the doppelganger whispered, its grin brimming with twisted satisfaction. "Don't worry, Evan, everything will be better, once you let me in." 10 seconds left. Evan stared into the mirror, then looked down at his trembling hands. His pulse pounded in his ears as the choice became clear. If he shattered the mirror, his parents would be saved, but the curse would take his soul. If he left it intact, they would remain trapped forever, but the darkness would never escape. The bell tolled one final time, midnight. Evan closed his eyes, taking one last deep breath. "I'm sorry, Mom." And then, with all his strength, he hurled the mirror to the ground. The sound of glass shattering filled the room, followed by a deafening scream as the curse was unleashed. A swirling black mist erupted from the broken shards, coiling around Evan like serpents. The cold seeped into his skin, and he felt the darkness flood his mind, drowning every thought and memory. The evil had claimed him, but in those final moments, as the darkness clawed at his soul, Evan whispered one last sentence. "I won." A burst of blinding light erupted from the shards, tearing the shadow apart in a brilliant flash. The curse howled in fury as it was ripped from Evan's body. Dissipating into nothingness, Evan collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath, his body heavy with exhaustion, but in his heart, he knew he had made the right choice. Silence fell over the room. Evan opened his eyes, and for the first time in years, he saw them, his parents, standing there, alive and real, with gentle smiles on their faces. "You did it," his mother whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "You saved us." Evan smiled, but it wasn't the smile of triumph. He knew the truth. Darkness never truly disappears. It only changes form, waiting patiently for its next chance to return. As the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, Evan followed his parents out of the house, leaving the shattered mirror behind. But deep inside, he knew a part of him remained within that glass, forever tied to the curse. And from the depths of the darkness, a familiar whisper echoed, soft and foreboding. "See you soon, Evan, very soon." And so Halloween night in Hollow Creek comes to an end, or at least, that's what Evan believes. He saved his parents. He defeated the darkness. But was the darkness really vanquished? Or did it simply change form, waiting for the perfect moment to return? As Evan stepped out of the abandoned house, he knew he could never truly escape what had happened. Because in every mirror we look into, sometimes, you don't see yourself staring back. Instead, it's something else, smiling from the other side. So remember, next time you accidentally shatter a mirror, don't be too quick to clean up the broken pieces. Because a part of you might still be trapped inside. And soon, the darkness will come looking for you. Until next time, when the ghosts of the past awaken once more, sleep well, if you can.